My brother and I love going out into nature, walking along forest trails with a metal detector. Sometimes we'd find old coins, which brought us endless joy. And recently, we even unearthed an old Nagant revolver from the time of World War I under a stone. We cleaned it up thoroughly, and now it sits proudly in our home collection. One day, we decided to go on another treasure hunt. We studied old maps and found a dense forest where, deep inside, there used to be a noble estate. It was quite a long way from home. We packed a bag with food and water, charged the detector, sharpened our shovels, and carefully loaded everything onto our bicycles. A little cycling trip was only a pleasure, and most importantly, it was good for us. Plus, we could get to places where a car simply couldn't go. We set out early in the morning. The place was about 30 kilometers from the city, and the road wasn't easy, but that didn't bother us at all. We reached the area in about 2 hours. On the way, we passed an old abandoned cemetery, which gave us an eerie feeling. But once it disappeared from sight, we felt at ease again. We rode through the forest for another 15 minutes until we reached a point from which we could start making our way toward the estate. Unfortunately, we didn't find a direct road, so we had no choice but to push through the thick brush. The forest was so dense that with the little light filtering through, it already felt like dusk. We weren't savages, but sometimes we had to use a small hatchet to clear a path through tightly packed young trees. It was clear that no one had set foot here for a very long time. After finally reaching our destination, we set up a small camp right where, according to our research, the estate once stood. Not even the foundation remained, only traces of its existence in history. After a quick meal, we assembled our metal detector and took turns searching the area, digging up nearly every signal. Mostly we found junk: horseshoes, door hinges, buttons. But all of it was proof that we were in the right place, and that life once thrived here. For most of the day, we didn't find anything valuable, and we had almost convinced ourselves that the place had been thoroughly searched before, when suddenly, the detector gave a strong, hopeful signal. And sure enough, after digging in that spot, we uncovered an old clay jug filled with ancient silver coins. The jug itself was in bad shape, but the coins were incredibly well preserved. We had finally found a treasure. We were overjoyed with our find. We wanted to keep searching, but the day was coming to an end, and we needed time to make it back home. So we decided to return another day. We packed up our camp and started walking in the direction we had come from. About 20 minutes into the hike, as we pushed through the undergrowth, we suddenly ended up back at the same spot. Time was running out. We tried again, and again. We returned to the estate. It was as if the place wouldn't let us go. Over and over we found ourselves back where we started. The sun hadn't yet set beyond the horizon, but inside the forest, it was already quite dark. We had no compass, and our phone GPS refused to work due to the lack of signal. In such a situation, it's hard to keep calm, but we didn't give up. We decided to spend the night where we had set up camp earlier. Thankfully, we had enough food. We started gathering firewood for a fire. As I broke small branches, I heard something crack deeper in the forest. I didn't think much of it. There were plenty of animals around. I didn't believe in the paranormal, and there were no bears or wolves in our area. The smaller wildlife wasn't dangerous. We lit a fire, a big one. It didn't improve visibility much, but at least it kept us warm. We pulled out our remaining food and began eating while examining the silver coins we had found. Then, another crackling noise. At first I thought it came from the firewood, but then it happened again, this time right behind us. We were genuinely scared. The sounds became more frequent. A strange feeling crept over me, like someone was watching us. The worst part was knowing that we had nowhere to run. If it was a predator, we were as good as trapped. Our only weapons were a dull, entrenching tool and a small hatchet. Not much of a chance if it came down to a fight. We threw more wood into the fire, making it burn brighter. And that's when we saw it. A figure, standing beyond the firelight, watching us. I froze in terror. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. My hair stood on end. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I had never seen anything like it before. Then, It raised its hands and slowly started walking toward us. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized we had to run. I grabbed my brother's shoulder, spinning him toward a tree. "Climb! Now!" Before I even realized it, I was already near the top. Looking around, I saw my brother had made it up another tree, a bit farther from me. And so we stayed there until morning. Below us, from time to time, we heard footsteps and inhuman wails. To say we were terrified would be an understatement. At dawn, everything went silent. We climbed down quickly, gathered our camp as fast as possible, and then we noticed something. The coins were gone. That thing had taken them. Honestly, better the coins than us. Strangely enough, as soon as we started walking, we found our way out of the forest on the first try. We rode home in complete silence. The road felt endless. But after 3 long hours, we finally made it back. I still don't know what we encountered in that forest, but we never went back. About 6 years ago, my friends and I had a tradition. We would spend the night skating and exploring creepy places. None of us had cars yet, so we traveled everywhere on foot. One night, we wandered farther than usual and came across a dense, eerie forest we had never been through before. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning. Standing at the edge of the woods, I suddenly felt a strange, unexplainable unease. A tightness in my chest, like we were doing something wrong, like someone, or something, was watching us. "Maybe we should go around," I suggested hesitantly, but my friends just laughed. "Come on, it's just a forest. What's there to be afraid of?" one of them said. I didn't want to look like a coward, so I shrugged and followed them inside. At first, everything seemed fine. We moved along a narrow path covered in dry leaves. The silence was absolute. No crickets, no wind rustling through the trees. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. About halfway in, I heard a faint rustling behind us. I froze and turned around quickly, but saw nothing. The others stopped, looking at me. "What is it?" one of them asked. "I thought I heard something," I muttered, though deep down, I knew I had. We kept walking, but a few minutes later, the sound came again, leaves crunching, like someone stepping carefully behind us. I turned my head slowly, and I saw it. A tall, pale figure with piercing red eyes stood among the trees. It didn't move. It just stared. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. "What the hell is that?" one of my friends whispered, but none of us had an answer. And then, it took a step forward. We ran. We didn't think, didn't look back. We just sprinted as fast as we could. The forest blurred around us, the shadows twisting and closing in. Behind us, we could hear the crunch of branches, the rustling of leaves, the sound of something chasing us. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't dare slow down. The only thing that mattered was getting out, to the road, to the lights, to safety. Finally, we burst out of the trees, stumbling onto the pavement. My chest heaved as I gasped for breath. And then, I turned back. It was still there, standing at the tree line, watching us. Only now did I realize I was shaking all over. One of my friends collapsed onto the ground, trying to catch his breath. No one spoke. After that night, we never stayed out until dawn again. And to this day, I still think about what we saw. It was a cold December night, and I was just a kid. The stack of firewood was nearing the bottom, and my grandmother knew it wouldn't last till morning. She asked my uncle to fetch some more from the mountains. My uncle took me with him, and we drove off in his pickup truck. He chopped the wood and I stacked it as fast I could. By the time we finished, the sun was setting and the bed of the pickup truck was half full. On the way home, the sun disappeared from the sky, and it grew very dark. We were driving down a dirt road that led through the woods. I leaned my head against the window and watched the silhouettes of the trees race past as the stars twinkled above them. All of a sudden, I got the awful feeling that we were being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine. My uncle had a strange look on his face, and he was staring directly ahead. Just then, I heard a tap-tap-tap on the window behind me. I started to turn around, but my uncle suddenly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart started beating rapidly. My uncle put his foot down on the accelerator, and we began to speed up. It was the first time I had ever seen real fear on my uncle's face. I heard another tap, tap, tap on the window beside me. "Look at me!" my uncle shouted. "Don't turn around! Keep looking at me!" I didn't know what was going on. My mind was racing. All of a sudden, I felt the truck dip as if something heavy had landed in the back. My uncle sped up even more and started praying loudly in our native language. I wanted to cry. I wanted it to stop. Once again, I heard a tap, tap, tap on the window behind me. "Just keep looking at me and don't turn away!" my uncle cried over and over. I could see he was on the verge of tears. He was driving faster and faster, pushing the engine to its limits. My heart was beating so rapidly I thought it would leap out of my chest. It was getting harder for me to breathe. I shut my eyes as tight as I could and whispered a prayer. A minute or two passed, and then the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and let out a deep sigh of relief. He slowed down, and everything was quiet again. All I could hear was the drone of the truck's engine and the crunch of the gravel on the dirt road. My uncle looked at me and said, "We will have your father do a prayer in the morning, so the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the clock on the dashboard as I listened to my uncle sing an old prayer. By the time we got back to my grandmother's house, I was almost asleep. My uncle carried me inside and put me to bed. To this day, my uncle has never talked about what happened that night.